welcome to the very first Solve It Once YouTube video. I'm Brad Cerniak, proprietor of Solve It Once, and today what I'd like to do is walk you through building the WordPress.org homepage, but using Frost Drupal, which is Solve It Once's very own Drupal distribution that has atomic components. And this is based on Jamie Marsland, a WordPress specialist, building out the WordPress.org homepage using WordPress's block editor Gutenberg. So without further ado, let's dig right in and see what makes Frost cool.
Okay, in true first video fashion, I tried to do a screen recording and ended up the video was wrong, and I have 20 minutes of audio that's really great for a video that doesn't exist. So what I'll do here is just go through the WordPress.org site and call out a couple of interesting things about the layout that will be different when we go and take a look at the Frost version. So first things first, presently it's not a huge development effort or anything, but in order to make some of the text within a heading have italic or some of it be regular weight and some of it bold, that would be taking the heading element and making it have a rich text editor. So that's something that we can do. It's just not baked into Frost in order to enforce some consistency with the headings. So first section is very simple, light background with a heading, then some rich text, and then a button that links elsewhere. Then there's a second section here with a image background, and then kind of a narrow centered column, text, heading, text, and then link. The next section, two-column layout, heading, image, and then rich text that has a mix of headings and other text and links. You can see that there's a little bit of padding on the left column, a little bit more padding on the right column. And we will take a look at the layout system that Frost Drupal uses in order to make that look good both on desktop and on mobile. Moving down into this section, we've got a heading, then a little bit of text, and then a line of images. Each of these is a distinct image, though if you wanted to reduce the number of assets, you could also turn that into a single one, but it would be weird for responsiveness. And as we'll see on the demo, there's a small development effort required to match this up perfectly. But it does, the Frost version does introduce another variable to this, then another link button. Now we have a section here that has the same background color as the one above. And this is a background image containing screenshot panels. And it's the whole section is just the image. There's no additional content. And I will make a note of that when we get to the Frost version. Then we've got the blue background. So assuming that this blue is very on brand for WordPress. And then white text on the blue background, two-column layout. One column's got a heading and text, and the other one has these horizontal rules separating for links. Then we move into another section here that has, once again, no content or heading, but a big background image and this kind of swooshy color over top of the background image that goes into the next section, this community at its core. So very large heading here. Looks like the H1 size, even though the markup probably doesn't indicate that it's actually an H1. And then sort of this jaunty column. So there's a whole bunch of negative space here. And then about 2/3 over, we have the blue text and a button. This button in its regular state is what I would call a ghost button. So the background is transparent and it has a border, and the border matches the same color as the text. That's kind of a classic ghost button. And that's something that can also be implemented fairly easily in Frost, but it's just not by default because ghost buttons are kind of an anti-pattern. So that's sort of just an opinion, but it's it's a thing that you can't avoid. Then we have another section, two columns here where the 3 most recent published posts and a read more link exist in the larger column, and the heading is like, hey, read our blog. And you'll see that I implemented this particular section a little bit different in the Frost version. And then finally here, this is probably the most distinct part of this layout and page design. It's a link it's a heading that contains a link, and the linked areas, both this text and this large arrow that's drawn in CSS and has a hover animation. So that's not something that you would find by default in pretty much any component system, but it's something where if you needed to create such a component, it's certainly viable to do in Frost. So if this part of the design is important to you as part of your site, it's certainly something that can be implemented as a standalone component or extending an existing component to make that work. But I didn't even make an attempt to replicate this arrow in any meaningful way. So it's just blue background, white heading, and then the contents of the rich text. So let's go take a look at what we have here in the demo. I'm presently in the logged in state for being in and administering the Drupal site. So you'll see a lot of these pencils, and this is an ability to edit the content or settings of any of the components on the page. So if I wanted to change what it says inside of this message component, I can come into the rich text editor and just do that exact thing. And then there's a spacer and so forth. So what you can see here, the analog to what we have at the very top of the WordPress page, white background, bold header, and that stuff. So you can see the color is different. The theme for the site, interestingly enough, if we go to the elements here and take a quick look at the styles, there's a single CSS file in, that's my CK editor. There's a single CSS file in the theme where you define a number of custom properties for things like the main font, secondary font, the color theme, so on and so forth, including spacing. So if you wanted to exactly replicate the WordPress color scheme, you could do that. It would just kind of break the spirit of things, because I mentioned here, without any custom development, we've built out this page. It's just placing various components using the Frost component system. So H1 heading, then some text, and a link button. You can see here that the hero is distinct from the rest of the content area. If there were any messages like, oh, you just saved the content, or the caches have been clear or something, it would appear here. Then the tabs for the various operations that you can perform on this particular piece of content. So presently we're viewing it, but we could go to the edit page, and we will. There's a plan tab that contains any content strategy or loose notes or things for your team in order to work on an individual piece of content that exists right there in the plan tab. I'll show you that right quick. So it's just, a plain long text field and a CK editor where you could paste in rich text from elsewhere that you intend to place on the page at a later date. And then this would just be loose notes that you'd share between UX specialists, a content strategist, developers, designers. Everybody on the team can be in the loop about a particular piece of content in this way. Then obviously you can delete content if you have the permission on the site to do so, view all of the revisions that have been made to the page as a whole. And if you're really happy with the page that you're on and you want to create a similar version, you can clone it and work from that starting point. So we'll go back to the view here and take a look at going down the page. So by default, many of the pages on the site have this breadcrumb navigation that works pretty well to keep people navigating in a consistent way and know where they are on the site with the implied structure. So after that, we get back into the real meat potatoes of the page. So you can see we have a dark background that it's an image background and a narrow column containing a heading with rich text and a link, same as you see on this page. And it's constructed, well, we'll take a look at the construction in a minute here. 2-column layout, heading, image. Just for kicks, I put a tiny caption in there. Then little bold headings with some rich text and links just to demonstrate that. We have this section, like I said, there's a little bit of a development effort here in order to make these images, rather than being scaled and cropped. Instead, we could just scale them so that there's no cropping that would make the logos be cut off. So one advantage of using the media listing, though, for these is like if I wanted to click in, it immediately puts the logo that's in that particular place into a lightbox. So that's kind of neat. And then just continuing to follow on, another link button. I couldn't resist the temptation to make the panel background area a little bit fancier. So for this, I just kind of put a little animation and created an MP4 video and used that video as the background. And you can see here that I put a heading in this section. Each of these stripes on the page is being treated as a section element in the HTML. And so for both accessibility and SEO and best practices, it makes a lot of sense to continue the document outline structure. And to do that, I placed a heading level 2 inside of this section. And you could put any sort of content over the background. There's no real limitation to that. So then the next little section here, the one with the horizontal rules and a 2-column layout, you can see it's a different shade of blue and that the horizontal rules would need to be styled slightly differently. But otherwise, it's the same content and the same layout. Moving on here, it's the same idea here with sections. They should have a heading level 2. For this section in particular, all it's doing is showing a background that kind of continues into the next section, like so. And there's a little bit, this is probably one of the areas where it took a little bit more finessing of some of the buttons and dials and stuff that we'll go through. Otherwise, a lot of the backgrounds and stuff just worked out of the box. Coming into the next section, it's another 2-column layout where one of the columns is empty so that we have this kind of jaunty feeling. And then the default of all the content in the section is right aligned text, but the column here has left aligned text. And that kind of gives a little bit of that, I don't know, off kilter feel that you would get from some of the layout on WordPress.org proper. So like I said, for the button, I could add a checkbox that takes any button and turns it into a quote unquote ghost button. At this point, instead, I'm just sticking with the regular ones. And then for the section with the 3 most recent blog posts, you can see that they have them formatted very just textually in this 2-column layout. I decided to stick to more of a cards layout. This comes straight out of the box. You can just drop this anywhere you want and have neat cards for the 3 most recent blog posts without any issue. Then a big vertical spacer just for fun before going into a view all link that takes you to the blog page. And then finally, like I mentioned quite a bit about the fun arrow here and how you can develop that pretty easily, but it's not something that just immediately comes out of the box. So blue section, white heading, and a little bit of rich text. And so how's all of this implemented and how was I able to do it in about 20 minutes? So if we go in and we look, and just to re-emphasize. If you wanted to come in and tweak just one piece of content here, no problem whatsoever. But if you want to do some overall editing work, it's a little bit more ergonomic to do it from the edit screen. So you can change what the title is, some of the SEO information, and then the way that you could see that the hero was distinct from the rest of the content area, because there was the breadcrumb navigation and tabs and so on and so forth in between. The hero on the edit screen is distinct. And when you click into one of these atomic stripes, you can see there's tons of components, and I've thrown a bunch of spacers in here. What I found is when you go into a design review, usually the feedback that you get is really oriented towards vertical spacing of items. So having a spacer that's available just to put a little bit of breathing room between items is useful, and it can be a utility for other things. So spacers are pretty slick that way. And then this is the same message that we clicked into in the modal earlier. You can see that the content's still here in the rich text editor, and there's also settings here. So the main setting for a message component is choosing its severity level: status blue, warning yellow, and error red, effectively. But you can theme that however you'd like. And then each stripe has a whole bunch of its own settings for the background and so on and so forth. And this is probably the least interesting of all of the stripes on the site. So we'll kind of slide down and take a look at some of the more interesting ones. So 2-column layout, you can get a preview of these before you click the edit button and go into all of them. Here's that media listing. So heading over a video of panels is a very interesting section to take a look at. From a content standpoint, I've put 2 huge spacers in between is a heading for semantic purposes. But in the stripe itself, the background color is set to black, and then separately you can change the text color to match in order to maintain contrast level. At the stripe level, you only choose dark or light, but you can choose a particular color when you choose like a heading or a particular element. It gets a little bit more fine-grained. Text alignment of the entire section is set here. You can unpad the default padding away and make the content go the full width and do all things like that. But what's neat here is we've got the background color, and then if we wanted to add a background image to match what we have for the video, can go to showcase 2560 like that. And then that image will show regardless of if the video loads. And then you can see that the image is set to be horizontal and vertically centered and to fill the whole area. And these are all reasonable defaults, so I didn't have to go in and change any of these settings. I mean, all told, if I wanted to just kind of mimic what was already there, I could have just uploaded the background image and called it a day. But we've got this background video, and it's just as easy as uploading a video from your media library, and it shows up. So I really enjoy that feature, because as much as I don't like really busy animations and everything on pages, I like to focus on the content. It still kind of amazes me that it works. So another 2-column layout, that was a simpler one. And then this section should always have at least a heading 2, just to show the distinction here. So this image, the alignment is to the bottom, and that way the little swooshy thing that makes it look neat will always appear. And it ends up, if we have to cut off any of the image, it would be towards the top of the group of people, which would be a little bit more on the acceptable side of things. And so overall, that's the crux of Frost Drupal from a component perspective.
Well, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Hopefully you learned a thing or two and think that Frost is a pretty viable option for your next website. So thank you for watching and have a great day. If you don't mind, hit subscribe and give it a like and send it around to your friends if you think it was worthwhile. Thank you.